Hey, good morning. Granny Gear here for Old Guy on a Bike. Sitting here on the side of a country road, and I'm thinking out loud about rim widths. Stay tuned on this Tech Tuesday. First of all, shout out to Johnny Cash, the man in black. You can tell I went shopping at the Johnny Cash Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. Yes, I did. I miss that man, and if you ever get a chance to listen to the American albums, the later series of albums in his life before he passed away, amazing music, truly an American icon. But I digress. Rim widths, what has me thinking about it is a recent introduction of a new gravel bike wheel from SRAM, the ZIPP is a 303 XPLR SW, something like that. Remarkable wheel. It's deep, it's 50 some millimeters deep. It's wide, it's 32 millimeters internal, which is cray-cray. It is 40 millimeters wide external, and it's not that heavy, so it's 1,500-ish grams, so it's in the ballpark there. But wow, who asked for that for gravel? What's that for? And does it make sense for guys like and gals? Like you and I? Well, talk about that coming up. But first, let's talk about what I saw happen in mountain bike rims, what I see happening in road rims, quickly my experiences with both of those, and then we'll talk about that ZIPP 303 XPLR SW. This is an old 29er wheel. I'm still using them on a bike. Mrs. Granny Gear uses this to go out and exercise the dog. This is an American classic wide lightning. And I bring this to your attention because when this was put out there on the market, this was years ago now, by Bill Shook, who was the owner of American Classic, the wheel company. He had an idea that if he made the rim wider, kept it light, he could take a smaller mountain bike tire and he would increase the volume of it, so you would have the bigger volume of a larger tire, which back then the larger tire would have been 2.2. This is before 2.4s, 2.5s are really a thing. He could run a 2.0 mountain bike tire, have a lighter weight tire, have the volume of the bigger tire, and on a light rim, it would make a killer cross-country race wheel. And it was. But you know what happened? The downhill type guys found it, and this rim was strong enough to survive, at least for a while on downhill. They found out that the wider internal rim, which on this wheel was either 29 or 30. Now remember, at the time, the standard for a 29er mountain bike rim was a 21 internal. So 29 or 30 was like, that was just like, wow, why would we want to do that? And they found out that it did all the things that we know now, that what happens when you make your rim wider internally. You gain volume in the tire, that the tire is able to spread out. You gain support on the sidewall of the tire, and so you can run lower pressures and have better traction, and yet you can still steer the bike confidently. Back when this rim came out, I took this wheel with a tire combination of its day on a bike and a regular rim of 21 millimeters, same tire, same bike, and I did this little single track course over and over and over. I kept dropping the pressure until I started to get some wiggly waggly steering that I wasn't comfortable with. On this wheel and tire combination, I went like 5 PSI lower before I was starting to lose steering control. We're starting to feel kind of bad, you know what I'm saying? And that was remarkable, and it was more comfortable because I was running lower pressures, and I had all those benefits that now we just expect in a wide rim and all the good things that does for us. But back then, that was really revolutionary. But you know what happened with mountain bike rims? They didn't keep getting wider. No, they didn't. My trail bike set of wheels that's running up to a 2.5 tire, that also is only a 30 millimeter wide rim, because what they found out was, as you added rim width in the mountain bike world, even up to a 2.4 or 2.5 type tire, you just gained weight. You gained weight. If it was an aluminum rim, you gained a lot of weight, and they became less stiff, less strong, at least anyway, let's say it that way. In carbon, not so much. So most of the wide rims, they went to carbon because, well, they retained, you know, lighter weight, and they were also stiff enough to not start to twist, which also means they got more expensive, didn't they? So We went out to maybe 40 millimeters wide in the rim. Now, if you think about it, a 2.4, 2.5 mountain bike tire is going to be about 60 millimeters wide. So a 30 millimeter rim, which now is pretty much the accepted sweet spot for even a trail bike rim internally, that's half the width of the tire. Well, that's certainly different than what we're seeing on the road, like on a wheel set like this. This is my Aries 4 AR from Rolf Prima. Now, it is 25 millimeters internal, and yet the tire on this is a 30 millimeter wide Specialized Turbo S. So that is only 5 millimeters more narrow than the tire is. And so, wow, that's way different than the whole mountain bike setup, isn't it? Where the rim is half the width of the tire. Why is that? Well, you know, mountain bike tires and road bike tires, well, they're not really asked to do the same thing, are they? A mountain bike tire has got to conform to the trail. It has to fend off rocks and roots and things. You want to keep your rim tucked in where the tire is bulging out in that light bulb shape. You don't want to get rid of that completely, because that is protecting your rim from rock strikes and damage and things. So you don't want to get rid of that. Also, a mountain bike tire, you want it to be compliant. You want it to be able to work with the trail and absorb. You don't want it to be floppy, but it needs to be able to compress and dig in and follow the contours of the trail. Well, a road bike wheel doesn't need to do that, a road bike tire. It needs to support you. It needs to be consistent, so when you push it hard through a fast sweeping corner, it doesn't fold and get kind of wiggly on you. So it doesn't ever need to really absorb rocks and roots and ruts and things much. Maybe a crack in the road would, about it. But what you do care about with a road wheel is you care about aerodynamics. You want the width of your rim and your tire to be as close as possible for the best performance into the wind. And so you could care less about that on a trail bike, mountain bike tire, right? That just doesn't mean a thing. But on a road bike wheel and tire, it does. Now, on this tire, I'm running 60 PSI on a 30 millimeter tire and on this 25 millimeter internal rim, which is, I would say, cutting edge width now for a road wheel. That's getting to be kind of wide. 60 PSI, this tire measures 32 millimeters. I was skeptical at first this was going to be the deal, but so far I am very, very happy. But what about gravel bike wheels and tires, and what about this Zipp Explorer that is so super wide? Where does that fit in? This is the gravel bike wheel and tire off my Turner Cyclosis. It's an Easton carbon rim. It's 23 internal. It's a WTB 42 millimeter Resolute at about 30 pounds or so, typically what I would run in it. What a gravel bike wheel and tire has to do is somewhat challenging, isn't it? Because it has to live in both worlds. It can be on the road. You could be doing a fairly fast paved descent on it, loading up the wheel and tire fairly high. You could take it and go under biking like I do sometimes into some very rough conditions off-road where it's kind of rutted and kind of rocky and kind of sandy. And you can also take it and try and win unbound with it, where you're riding in 20 mile an hour average or higher for hours at a time into the wind. So what the gravel bike wheel and tire has to do is, well, it's got a full plate, which kind of brings me to the Zipp 303 XPLR SW. Hope I'm saying that right, because it's kind of a word salad, but you know what I'm talking about. It's 50 some millimeters deep. Wow, that's deeper than my road wheel is. That would be typical depth for a, I would say, decently aero road bike wheel. It's 32 millimeters wide, which is wider than the internal width of my trail bike wheels for my mountain bike. It's 40 millimeters wide external, which is just huge, almost to the point where it's getting to be almost as wide as this WTB 42 millimeter tire on here. Well, what are we to make of that? Well, what Zipp seems to be chasing here is aero benefits, and that's what they're claiming, that this wheel was designed to be used to get the sidewall of that rim as closer to what the width of the tire will be. And we know as we get the tire and rim combination, like on the road, we get this about even, that is more aerodynamic, it's faster into the wind. So they're trying to achieve that with a gravel wheel, but since gravel bike tires are very wide and they're getting wider, you know, some of the pros these days, and not just pros, they're running 50 millimeter wide tires, and sometimes 2.1, 2.2 fast 29er tires on their gravel bikes if the course demands that. Well, even a 40 millimeter rim isn't going to be that wide, but it is kind of getting closer to what the tire width is going to be. And so is there aero benefits for that for a few watts? I'm told that there is, so there is that. Also, if the rim's that wide, 32 millimeters wide, I'm going to assume that a tire like this 42 millimeter Resolute, well, it's going to get even more volume to it, at least up to a point. But there is a line that you can cross, and this is what happened in mountain biking, and I think it's going to happen in gravel riding too. Now, whether this rim crosses that line, I don't know. It could, possibly, depending on the tire. What they found in mountain biking, as your rim got wider, say it got up to 40 millimeters wide and beyond, you know, it got heavy, it got less stiff, especially in aluminum, and it got less strong. But they found out that, you know, the tire at some point, if you keep erasing your light bulb and you keep widening the tire out, a couple things happen, right? You do support the tire more, but you also change the tread, how the tread interacts with the ground, because the tire was not designed to become flatter and flatter and flatter. And so you actually can lose traction. You also, as you take your tire out and you make the sidewalls of the tire straighter, you do get more support like you do on the road wheel, but off-road you start to lose compliance. You start to lose the ability of the tire to conform as easily to the surface of the road, and that isn't necessarily a good thing. And also, as your rim gets wider and wider compared to the width of your tire, you are going to start taking more hits to the rim when you're just running along. You're running through a deep, rocky little gravel field or something. Your rim is no longer shielded by the light bulb of the tire like it is on my trail bike. My tire is much wider than my 30 millimeter internal rim is, and so for me to strike something with the rim is possible, not near as likely as it's going to be on a gravel bike. As the rim gets wider and wider and wider, you're exposing that very expensive carbon rim to all the little sharp pointy things out there with not near as much tire width and light bulb to protect it. So you had to think about that too. So we saw this progression in mountain bike wheels where we went from 21 to 30 and it was like, wow, that is like crazy good. Then they went from 30 up to like 40 and went, well, that's really not nearly as good, and they kind of walked back. I don't think road rims are going to get much more wider internal than 25. I mean, maybe they could get wider external potentially, but there is a limit to where that internal width is going to be and still work with, you know, in a safety factor, et cetera, with tires. Unless we're going to start running 34 millimeter wide road tires as the rule, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think 30, 32 is probably going to be that settled sweet spot for an all-around balance of weight and performance and comfort and traction. But, you know, I've been wrong before. So is the ZIPP 303 XPLR SW the future of gravel wheels and tires and all that? You know, right now SRAM is only approving certain tires to be run on this wheel. And right now I think there's two. They're both from Goodyear, which is interesting that you had to have the tire approved to run on the rim, which I don't know if that's CYA for the lawyers because they're so far outside the ISO recommendations for matching a tire to a rim width. Is that what it is? Is it truly that they have gone so far beyond what the tire was designed for in width that they just aren't working as well, and the tire manufacturers are going, I don't think so. I don't know what that is, but it's interesting to see. I don't think really I want a rim that I can only run certain tires on. And how big will the list of tires get? Is it just a formality and we're going to see everybody's tire approved for it? I don't really know. It's a bold move. I'm not sure if it's one that's going to carry any momentum. We can see what happened, you know, in the mountain bike side of things. In the meantime, we'll watch and see what happens. I'm not giving up my 25 millimeter wide internal rims for gravel anytime soon, but you know what? I'm old enough to have been wrong before, and at one time in the history of my experience, I thought a 21 millimeter mountain bike rim was all you needed. You guys have a great week and or weekend, and as always, go ride your bikes.